Keanu was only 7 years old, a little boy with wide eyes that often carried more questions than answers. Childhood for him was not the same as it was for many others. There were days filled with laughter, yes, but also many days when silence felt heavier than words. His family had gone through many changes, moving from one place to another, never really planting roots. For a boy his age, it was confusing. Sometimes he felt like life was shifting around him too fast, and he did not know where he truly belonged. His grandmother, a gentle woman with a calm spirit, noticed this. She had lived through years of hardship and joy, and her eyes carried a wisdom that children often trust without even asking why. She would sit in her small chair by the window, knitting slowly, and she would always glance at Keanu when he walked by. She could see the quiet sadness in him, the way he sometimes avoided talking too much, the way he often looked out of the window, lost in thought, as if searching for something far away. One evening, the house was quiet, and the sky outside was painted in shades of orange and pink. His grandmother called him over softly. "Come here, my boy," she said, patting the chair beside her. Keanu climbed up and sat next to her, his small legs dangling as he looked at her with curiosity. She held his hand gently, her fingers warm and steady. "You know," she began in her soft, steady voice, "life is not always easy. Sometimes it feels heavy, even when you are little. But I want to share something with you, something that was given to me when I was your age." Keanu tilted his head, listening closely. His grandmother leaned in a little, lowering her voice as if she was about to tell him a secret. "It is a prayer," she whispered. "A secret prayer. Not everyone knows it. But it is simple. You do not have to remember big words. You do not have to ask for miracles. It is not about asking for toys or wishing for things. This prayer is about finding your own strength when the world feels too much." Keanu's eyes widened. At 7, he didn't fully understand what she meant, but her words carried a weight that made him listen carefully. His grandmother then began to say the prayer slowly, each word spoken with care. They were not long words, not complicated ones, but they felt powerful. They spoke about kindness, courage, patience, and love. She told him, "Whenever you feel scared, or sad, or lost, close your eyes and say these words quietly. You don't need anyone else to hear them. This is between you and your heart. If you say them with honesty, you will feel stronger. You will feel lighter." Keanu repeated the words softly, almost whispering, his young voice trembling as he tried to remember them. His grandmother smiled gently, nodding, and told him not to worry if he forgot. "The prayer will always stay inside you once you say it with your heart," she explained. That night, Keanu lay in his small bed, the blanket pulled up to his chin. He thought about what his grandmother had told him. He closed his eyes and tried the prayer for the first time on his own. The words felt strange at first, but as he whispered them, he felt a calmness he had not felt before. The quiet sadness that often pressed on his heart seemed to soften. For the first time in a long time, he fell asleep peacefully, without feeling like the world was too heavy for his little shoulders. The next morning, he woke up with a small smile. He did not tell anyone, not even his mother, about the prayer. It felt too special, like a secret treasure he had to protect. He only shared a knowing smile with his grandmother when she saw him at breakfast, and she gave him a look that said she understood. From that day on, whenever Keanu felt nervous at school, he would whisper the words in his heart. If another child laughed at him, or if he felt lonely in a classroom full of noise, he closed his eyes for a second and remembered the secret his grandmother gave him. It was like carrying a light in his pocket that only he knew was there. The prayer was not about changing the world outside. It was about changing how he felt inside. Even though he was still a boy with many challenges ahead, he now had a quiet strength that came from within. His grandmother sometimes asked him softly, "Did you use the prayer today?" And he would nod. She never asked for details. She never asked him to prove it. She simply trusted that he was learning. Keanu began to understand that the prayer was not magic, but it was powerful. It reminded him to stay kind, even when people were not kind to him. It reminded him to stay patient, even when life seemed unfair. It reminded him that courage was not about being unafraid, but about moving forward even when afraid. At 7 years old, Keanu did not know what the future would bring. He did not know the fame, the struggles, or the heartbreaks that were waiting for him. But in that moment, he knew one thing: his grandmother's secret prayer would always be his companion. Every word of that prayer became a seed planted deep in his heart. And though he was just a little boy then, those seeds were already beginning to grow into the calmness, strength, and kindness that would one day define the man he would become. The evening sun set again, painting the sky in the same shades of orange and pink. Keanu sat by the window, whispering the prayer quietly to himself. He felt safe. He felt strong. And he knew that no matter what happened tomorrow, he carried inside him a secret that no one could ever take away. As the days went by, Keanu began to use the prayer in small, quiet ways. It was not something he told anyone about, not even his closest friends at school. To him, it felt like carrying a secret jewel in his pocket, something so valuable that it could only be taken out when he truly needed it. Whenever he felt uneasy, he would close his eyes for a second, repeat the words his grandmother had whispered, and slowly feel the tightness in his chest ease. At school, Keanu was not the loudest child. He was not the one who always raised his hand first or ran the fastest in the playground. He often stood back, observing more than speaking. There were times when this made him feel left out. Some children teased him for being quiet, and that hurt him deeply, though he rarely showed it. Instead of crying in front of others, he would go to a quiet corner, close his eyes, and let the words of the prayer run through his heart. Somehow, those words reminded him that it was all right to be himself. His grandmother often reminded him gently, "This prayer is not about changing other people, my boy. It is about changing how you feel inside. When the world feels heavy, you must remember you carry light within you." Keanu did not fully grasp the depth of her words, but he understood enough to know that whenever he used the prayer, something inside him felt calmer. One morning, he had to stand in front of the class to read a short story he had written. His hands shook as he held the paper, and his heart raced so fast he thought everyone could hear it. The teacher smiled at him, encouraging him to begin, but his throat felt dry. He glanced at the faces of his classmates, some already giggling, waiting for him to stumble. In that moment of fear, he closed his eyes just for a second, repeated the prayer silently, and then began to read. His voice was not perfect, and he still stumbled on a few words, but the calmness helped him finish. The teacher praised him, and for the first time, he felt a small spark of confidence. Later, at home, his grandmother asked him how the day went. Keanu told her about the reading, about the fear, and about how the prayer had helped him. His grandmother smiled, gently patting his hand. "That is how it works, my dear. Life will put you in moments where you doubt yourself. But remember, the words you carry in your heart are stronger than the noise outside." Over time, Keanu began to understand that the prayer was not about asking for toys, or for problems to disappear, but about finding the courage to keep moving forward. He used it when he felt lonely, when he had to try something new, and when he worried about his family. His home life was not always easy, with changes and challenges that sometimes made him feel uncertain about tomorrow. But every time fear tried to sit in his heart, he returned to the prayer, and the fear slowly softened. One evening, after a particularly difficult day, Keanu sat alone by the window. He had felt left out at school again, and for a moment, tears had filled his eyes. His grandmother noticed and quietly joined him. She didn't ask too many questions, she just sat there with him until he felt ready to speak. Finally, he whispered, "Why does life feel so hard sometimes, Grandma?" She looked at him with gentle eyes and said, "Because life is meant to teach us, little by little. If it were always easy, we would never grow strong. The prayer I gave you is not meant to remove the hard things. It is meant to remind you that you are stronger than you think. Every time you use it, you grow a little more. Keanu thought about her words for a long time. That night, he said the prayer again before bed, not just because he was sad, but because he wanted to remember her lesson. He realized that the prayer was more than words, it was a key to something inside him that he had not known was there. In the weeks that followed, Keanu used the prayer like a quiet rhythm in his life. If he felt nervous, he whispered it. If he felt sad, he whispered it. If he wanted to remind himself to be kind, he whispered it. Each time, he felt as though his grandmother was standing beside him, even if she was in another room. His grandmother also taught him another lesson connected to the prayer. She told him, kindness is part of strength. When you use the prayer, do not only think about yourself. Think about others too. If someone hurts you, the prayer will help you forgive. If someone is sad, the prayer will help you give comfort. Strength is not only for yourself, it is for those around you. Keanu listened carefully, and he began to try. One day, he noticed a boy sitting alone at school. The boy looked sad, the way Keanu sometimes felt. Normally, Keanu would have stayed quiet, but he remembered his grandmother's words. He said the prayer silently, and then walked over to sit beside the boy. They didn't talk much, but that small act of company brought comfort to both of them. That day, Keanu understood that his grandmother was right. Strength was not only for himself, but something he could share. As time passed, the prayer became a quiet habit. It did not matter where he was, on the playground, in the classroom, or even when he was at home feeling restless. He knew he could close his eyes, repeat the words, and find peace. It was almost as if the prayer built a small invisible shield around his heart, protecting him from the weight of the world. Still, he kept it a secret. He never told his teachers or his friends. He didn't even tell his mother. It felt too special to share, too personal, like something sacred that only he and his grandmother understood. When he caught his grandmother looking at him knowingly, he realized she never expected him to share it with anyone else. She had given it to him as a gift, and she trusted him to carry it wisely. The seasons changed. The leaves outside turned from green to yellow, from yellow to bare branches, and then to blossoms again. With each season, Keanu grew a little taller, a little older, and a little stronger. But no matter how much he changed on the outside, the prayer remained the same inside him. It was his anchor, his secret compass, and his gentle reminder that even in the hardest moments, he could stand steady. At 7 years old, many children would not understand such things. But Keanu was learning. He was learning that sometimes strength does not roar, it whispers. Sometimes courage is not about being the loudest or the fastest, but about being steady in silence. His grandmother's prayer was teaching him all of this, quietly, patiently, shaping him into someone who could carry kindness, patience, and courage with him everywhere he went. As the sun set once again, painting the sky in soft colors, Keanu sat by the window, repeating the prayer softly to himself. He smiled faintly, knowing that tomorrow might bring new challenges, but he had something within him that no one could ever take away. And that was enough. As Keanu grew older, the challenges around him began to feel bigger. Childhood had its small struggles, like being teased at school or feeling nervous in class, but now new difficulties began to appear. His family life was not always steady. There were times when people he loved were far away, and times when sadness entered the home like an uninvited guest. Keanu, still young, could feel the weight of these moments, though he did not always understand why they were happening. He often wondered why life seemed to test him so much. Some nights, lying awake in bed, he would listen to the silence of the house and feel his chest heavy with worry. He was still just a boy, but sometimes he felt much older than his years. Yet in those quiet hours, when the sadness felt too close, he returned to the secret his grandmother had given him. He whispered the prayer, word by word, and slowly the storm inside him softened. The prayer became his steady companion, like a shadow that followed him wherever he went. At school, when classmates laughed too loudly at his mistakes, he did not break down. Instead, he whispered the prayer under his breath, and it reminded him that their laughter could not define him. At home, when he heard arguments or felt the silence of absence, he closed his eyes, repeated the words, and remembered that strength was already within him. It was not magic. The prayer did not make the problems disappear. His family still had struggles. His life still felt uncertain. But the difference was inside him. He no longer felt as helpless as before. He had something that gave him courage to face the difficulties, even if they remained. There were days when Keanu felt like giving up. Days when nothing seemed to go right, when he felt small and invisible in a world that was too big. On those days, he remembered sitting beside his grandmother in the soft evening light, hearing her gentle voice guide him through the words. The memory itself gave him comfort. It was like carrying a piece of her wisdom everywhere he went. People around him began to notice something different about Keanu. He was not the loudest child, nor the most outspoken, but there was a calmness about him. When others lost their temper, he stayed quiet. When others panicked, he stayed steady. Teachers sometimes remarked that Keanu seemed thoughtful beyond his years. Friends, though they did not know his secret, often turned to him when they felt upset, because his quiet presence gave them peace. One afternoon, Keanu and a group of children were playing outside. A sudden argument broke out between two boys, their voices loud, their anger rising. The other children stepped back, unsure what to do. Keanu, though nervous inside, closed his eyes for a moment and whispered the prayer. Then he walked forward, speaking softly to calm them. He did not shout or force them apart. He simply stood there, steady, speaking with a calm voice that seemed to lower the tension. Slowly, the boys stepped back, their anger fading. The other children looked at Keanu with surprise. He had not done anything dramatic, but somehow, his calmness had changed the moment. That evening, Keanu thought about what had happened. He realized that the prayer was shaping him in ways he had not noticed before. It was teaching him not only how to face his own struggles, but how to bring peace to others. His grandmother's words echoed in his heart, "Strength is not only for yourself, it is for those around you." The years moved forward, and with each step, Keanu faced new challenges. There were losses that struck his family, moments of pain that left scars on his young heart. He did not always have answers, and sometimes the sadness felt too strong to carry. But every time he felt close to breaking, he returned to the prayer. It was like a rope pulling him back to safety when he felt he was falling. He began to understand more clearly what his grandmother had meant when she said the prayer was not about miracles. The world outside remained unpredictable, filled with both joy and pain. But the prayer gave him a place of balance inside himself. It was like carrying a candle in the dark, small, fragile, but strong enough to guide him forward. As Keanu entered his teenage years, the prayer continued to be his anchor. His friends faced their own struggles, some with family, some with loneliness, some with fear about the future. Keanu did not always tell them about the prayer, but he often shared the calmness it gave him. He would listen when they needed someone to talk to, and he would offer quiet encouragement. What they did not know was that, in his heart, he was silently repeating the prayer, asking for strength to be kind and steady for them. One day, after school, Keanu found himself walking home under a grey sky. Rain began to fall, and with it, a sadness he could not explain. He felt the weight of many things: his own fears, the struggles of his family, the uncertainty of tomorrow. For a moment, it felt too much. He stopped in the rain, closed his eyes, and whispered the prayer. The rain did not stop, but the heaviness inside him slowly lifted. He walked the rest of the way home with steady steps, the words of the prayer echoing softly in his heart. His grandmother watched him grow with quiet pride. She did not need to ask if he was using the prayer; she could see it in the way he carried himself. "You are learning well, my boy," she told him one evening. "Life has already given you many lessons, but you are not broken. You are strong. Always remember, storms will come and go, but the strength inside you will remain. Keanu nodded, holding her words close. He knew that life would continue to test him. He knew that the path ahead would not be easy. But he also knew that he was not powerless. With every whisper of the prayer, he reminded himself that he carried within him something no one could take away: courage, kindness, and peace. The more he grew, the more the prayer became part of him. It was no longer just words he repeated. It was a way of living. It guided his choices, his actions, and his attitude toward others. He began to see that even when life was unfair, he did not have to answer with bitterness. Even when life was painful, he could still choose kindness. The prayer gave him the strength to do so. In those early years, the prayer shaped him quietly, like water shaping stone. It was not loud. It was not dramatic. But it was steady, patient, and powerful. And though Keanu was still just a boy, the seeds of strength planted by his grandmother were already growing deep roots inside him. As Keanu stepped into adulthood, life began to test him in ways that childhood could not prepare him for. The little boy who once whispered a prayer before bedtime was now a young man standing in a world much bigger, louder, and heavier than before. Fame began to enter his life, slowly at first, then all at once. The bright lights of Hollywood shone on him, but they also cast long shadows that most people never saw. At first, everything looked like a dream. Acting gave him a path, a chance to use his imagination and share stories with the world. People clapped for him, cheered for him, and began to recognize his name. Yet behind the applause, there was a pressure he had never known before. Scripts, auditions, long hours, and the constant demand to be perfect. It was overwhelming. Many around him warned that Hollywood could swallow a person whole if they weren't careful. Keanu felt this warning in his bones. There were moments when the noise of fame became too loud. Reporters wrote stories about him, some true, some untrue. Cameras followed him, flashing in his face. Strangers shouted his name on the street, some with love, others with judgment. In those moments, he remembered his grandmother's words: the prayer is not about changing the world outside. It is about changing how you feel inside. So even in the middle of busy sets, even while waiting backstage before an interview, Keanu would quietly close his eyes for a second, repeat the prayer in his heart, and feel the calmness return. He carried the secret prayer with him like armor, unseen by anyone else, but always protecting him. But fame was only one part of his journey. Life also brought him pain in ways far deeper than the pressure of cameras and lights. Keanu faced personal losses, losses that would have broken many people. In those dark moments, when grief felt like an ocean threatening to pull him under, he turned again to the prayer. He remembered being a boy, sitting beside his grandmother in the orange evening light, repeating the words that once gave him peace. Now, as a man, those same words became his lifeline. They did not erase his grief, but they gave him the strength to live through it. They reminded him that pain, while powerful, did not have to destroy him. People around Keanu often wondered how he carried himself with such calmness, even in the face of heartbreak. They saw his humility, his kindness, his quiet strength, and they admired it. What most did not know was that behind those qualities was a simple prayer taught to him at 7 years old. A prayer that reminded him every day that life could be painful, but he could still choose kindness. That life could be unfair, but he could still remain steady. On film sets, Keanu became known not only for his talent but also for his gentleness. He treated everyone the same, whether they were actors, crew members, or people working quietly behind the scenes. He never saw himself as higher than anyone else. This attitude surprised many in an industry where fame often changes people. But Keanu's heart had been shaped differently. His grandmother's lesson lived inside him: strength is not loud or arrogant, it is humble, patient, and kind. There were nights when the city around him glittered with lights, yet he sat alone in his apartment, whispering the prayer. Sometimes he whispered it before bed, sometimes while walking through crowded streets, sometimes even while riding his motorcycle to clear his thoughts. The prayer traveled with him everywhere. In interviews, when asked how he stayed so grounded despite fame, Keanu never revealed the full truth. He smiled softly and gave simple answers. But deep inside, he knew the secret: his grandmother's words had become the foundation of his life. The prayer was not just something he said in difficult times. It had become a way of living, a silent rhythm guiding his every step. He remembered her advice clearly: when you use the prayer, do not only think of yourself. Think of others too. And so, even as he faced his own struggles, he used the prayer to help him remain kind to those around him. When he saw someone hurting, he listened. When he met someone who felt invisible, he made them feel seen. When he had the chance to choose arrogance, he chose humility instead. The world saw the actor. His friends saw the man. But only Keanu carried the secret of the boy who once sat beside his grandmother, learning a prayer that would shape every choice he made. Years passed, and the challenges never stopped coming. Success brought its own trials. Heartbreak continued to test him. Yet through it all, Keanu kept walking steadily. Each step was guided not by the loud applause of the world, but by the quiet whisper of the prayer in his heart. There were times when he thought about his grandmother, her soft hands holding his, her gentle eyes watching him as she gave him the words. She was no longer beside him physically, but her presence lived inside him through the prayer. It was as if every time he repeated the words, he could feel her close again, guiding him, encouraging him, reminding him that he was stronger than he knew. The world outside might have seen him as a star, but inside, Keanu remained the same boy who once needed a prayer to face his fears. That boy never disappeared. He simply grew older, carrying the same lesson into every new stage of life. Through fame, through loss, through all the noise and silence of life, the prayer never left him. And because of it, neither did his strength. As Keanu moved through life, he began to realize the true power of the prayer his grandmother had taught him. It was no longer just words he repeated silently when afraid or sad. It had become the lens through which he saw the world. Every choice he made, every moment he lived, carried the essence of those early lessons. And the more he practiced living with the prayer in his heart, the more he noticed how it touched others as well. He remembered the days when he first began to understand that life was not just about him. As a child, it had been simple: the prayer made him feel safe, helped him sleep, and made him brave enough to face a bully or a sudden storm. But as an adult, he saw a larger truth. Life was interconnected. Every act of kindness, every moment of patience, every choice to listen or forgive, rippled outward in ways he could not always see. And through all of it, the prayer served as his guide, quietly reminding him to remain compassionate, even when the world seemed harsh. Keanu's friends and colleagues noticed something different about him. While fame and success often made people distant, he remained approachable and grounded. People would tell him that he had a rare ability to make them feel seen and understood. Some said it was his calm voice, others mentioned his quiet smiles. But for Keanu, the secret was simpler than any explanation. It was the prayer. Every time he repeated it in his heart, he felt the strength to care, even when he was tired, sad, or unsure. Life continued to bring challenges, of course. Keanu faced losses, disappointments, and moments of doubt. He lost friends and family members, endured painful setbacks, and experienced days when the world felt heavy and unkind. Yet in every one of those moments, he found the same quiet strength he had learned from his grandmother. He would sit alone, sometimes on a park bench, sometimes in the quiet of his apartment, and repeat the prayer silently. And each time, it reminded him that even when life hurt, he could still act with kindness, patience, and courage. One day, while filming a new movie, Keanu noticed a young actor struggling on set. The boy was nervous, unsure of himself, and afraid of failing in front of the entire crew. Keanu remembered himself at that age, how afraid he had felt of being wrong or laughed at. Without thinking, he walked over, knelt beside him, and quietly offered encouragement. "Take a deep breath," he said softly. "You are capable. You can do this." And as he spoke, he felt the familiar warmth of his grandmother's prayer guiding him. The boy looked at him, eyes wide, and nodded. In that simple moment, Keanu realized that the prayer was not just for him anymore. It could touch others too. Through the years, Keanu also began to share the lessons of the prayer in ways he never expected. He didn't announce it to the world or write about it publicly. He simply acted with integrity, humility, and kindness. When he donated to charities, he did it quietly. When he helped a stranger, he did it without expecting recognition. When he comforted a grieving friend or worked patiently with a coworker, he did it because he could. And slowly, the ripple of goodness spread, touching countless lives in ways he never fully saw. There were moments when he reflected on the boy he had once been, the boy who sat by his grandmother, hands folded, eyes closed, repeating the words she had taught him. That boy had been small, fragile, and full of wonder. Yet that same boy had grown into a man who carried a quiet, unwavering strength. It was not a strength of fame, wealth, or power. It was the strength of heart, of spirit, of kindness anchored in something deeper than the world could take away. Keanu often thought about the future, wondering how he could continue to live by those principles even as life changed. He understood now that challenges would never fully disappear. People would continue to judge, disappoint, or misunderstand him. Life would continue to bring pain, sometimes in ways that felt unfair or cruel. But the prayer had taught him an essential truth: the power to respond with calm, courage, and kindness was always within him. He could not control everything around him, but he could control how he chose to act. And that choice, repeated again and again, was what truly defined him. Even in quiet moments at home, Keanu reflected on the meaning of his life. He thought about the people who had shaped him, the grandmother who had taught him the prayer, the friends who had supported him, the strangers who had shown him unexpected kindness. He realized that the world was full of connections, invisible threads linking people together in ways that were sometimes magical. And the prayer had taught him how to honor those connections, how to act with care, and how to remain gentle even when it was difficult. On a chilly evening, Keanu found himself walking along a quiet street, the sky painted with shades of pink and orange. He passed children playing, couples laughing, and an elderly woman tending to her garden. In that simple scene, he felt a deep sense of gratitude. Life was not perfect, but it was beautiful in its small, fleeting moments. And as he whispered the prayer in his heart, he felt a quiet joy, a joy that did not depend on applause or recognition, but on the simple truth that he had learned as a 7-year-old boy, to live with love, courage, and kindness. The prayer had become more than words. It was a way of seeing the world, a way of choosing how to act, a reminder of the boy he once was and the man he had become. Keanu knew that life would continue to challenge him, but he also knew that the lessons of his grandmother would remain with him forever. They were a compass in a world that could sometimes feel confusing or harsh. They were a source of calm in the storm, a light in the darkness, a gentle guide through every decision, every loss, every triumph. And so, Keanu Reeves carried the secret prayer of his childhood into every corner of his life. It was present in his quiet moments, his public appearances, his interactions with others, and even in his private reflections. The boy who had once whispered the words beside his grandmother had grown into a man who lived by them every day. The prayer had shaped his heart, his character, and his path, creating a life filled with kindness, resilience, and quiet strength. In the end, Keanu understood something profound: the true power of the prayer was not in changing the world, but in changing himself. And through that transformation, he had a subtle but powerful influence on the world around him. Every act of care, every moment of patience, every choice to be gentle and brave, these were the echoes of the prayer. They were the proof that even a small, simple lesson from a grandmother could shape a life in ways that nothing else could. As he looked out at the horizon, feeling the soft wind on his face and the warmth of the fading sun, Keanu smiled. He carried the prayer forward, not as a secret hidden away, but as a living part of who he was. And in that moment, he knew, with absolute clarity, that the lessons of his childhood, the lessons of love, faith, and quiet courage would never leave him. They would continue to guide him, inspire him, and shine through him for the rest of his life. And so, the secret prayer his grandmother had taught him when he was 7 became more than a memory. It became the heart of his life, the foundation of his choices, and the light that helped him navigate every shadow. It was a simple truth, but a powerful one: kindness, courage, and love could survive anything, and they could shape not only his life, but the lives of everyone around him. And with that knowledge, Keanu walked forward, steady, calm, and full of the quiet joy that comes from knowing that no matter what happens, the strength of a small prayer from childhood could carry a person through the entire world.